Okay, so let's get started with the webinar on engaging older women in your community. I'm going to start with introducing our three presenters today. So the first speaker will be Krista James. Krista is the National Director of the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. She's also a staff lawyer with the British Columbia Law Institute. And her work is focused on the legal and policy issues that impact us as we age. So she has written on topics like abuse, the neglect of older adults, mental capacity, caregiving policy, and she is going to be presenting the tool this morning. Krista will be followed by Shahnaz Rahman. Shahnaz is working for WestCoast Leaf. She manages the community-based programming with a focus on using family law to advance women's equality rights. And Shahnaz has an experience as an educator, author, counselor, facilitator, building community partnerships with diverse groups. And finally, we have Clemencia Gomez from the South Granville Senior Center in Vancouver. She is the executive director of the center. And the South Granville Center provides a diverse range of programs and services for seniors, which includes a program for Spanish-speaking seniors who are battling language barriers and poverty issues. So these are your three presenters. Obviously, I could go on. They all have wonderful resumes, but I want to give them enough time to present their tool, which is why we're here. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone and the platform to Krista. Krista,
hi.
You're unmuted. Hi. Absolutely.
Oh.
And you're about to share your screen.
Yeah. Okay. Now I have to open the separate presentation myself. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm just going back to my slides at the beginning. Sorry for the, there we go. Slideshow mode. Oh, it's gone to the beginning. All right. Okay. Now, can everyone see the first blue slide for me? Does that look right, Benedict?
I can see it.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. I'm just going to set my timer here so I don't go over to my 15 minutes. So I just want to, first of all, thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to be talking about this work, and I noticed that April Struthers is on the webinar, and I just want to do a shout out to April, who has been significantly involved in the Older Women's Dialogue Project as a facilitator. So just a few words about the Canadian Centre for Elder Law. We are a nonprofit national organization focused on the law and policy issues that impact us as we age. At any given time, we'll have maybe 5 to 10 projects on the go, all funded by different sources, but always integrating aging and the law. In recent years, we've actually had quite a number of projects focused on older women. If you look at this slide, it shows the 4 different aspects of our work. All of our project information is on our website, so you can download any of the tools that we develop for free. Mentioning just a couple things right now in terms of law reform, we have a 1.5-year long project focused on healthcare consent and dementia, which is a collaboration with the Alzheimer's Society of BC. And in a few days, in terms of legal research, we'll be publishing a study paper on vulnerable investors. We've collaborated with WestCoast Leaf many times, and in particular, in terms of public legal education. Last year, we worked on a Roads to Safety Handbook of Legal Information for Older Women Fleeing Abuse. So if you're listening to this webinar, you might also be interested in taking a look at that tool. You can find it on both of our websites. Moving on to the second slide. So just to let you know what I'll be focused on in my part of the presentation, I want to introduce the Older Women's Dialogue Project because the guide has really been developed as an offshoot of that project work. And I want to outline presentation, all these quotes for my computer's flashing something. There you go. To explore the pressing law and policy issues that impact older women. What are these pressing issues? And to think about what can we do to address these quality of life barriers for older women, primarily by working in collaboration with older women. The primary method of gathering information throughout this project has been consultation focus groups with older women. We've held focus groups in 9 different languages. To some extent, the work is deliberately not representative of all older women generally. We are specifically targeting women who have more barriers to having their voices heard, their experiences from law and policy. So we're particularly targeting low-income women, immigrant women, Indigenous women, women with disabilities. We started this work because we noticed in our own work that the experiences of older women were noticeably absent from all legal research and social policy work. We wanted to fill that gap by developing data on what are the pressing barriers to well-being that older women face in order to enhance everyone's capacity to take action to address these urgent issues. This sort of invisibility of older women is fairly strong across the board, and just this slide gives you an example of two really excellent pieces of research that nonetheless pretty much ignore older women. And so the Canadian Network of Women's Shelters and Transition Houses releases this fabulous data on women using transition houses every year, last published Shelter Voices in 2016, and there's no data on older women's use of transition houses, although we know that there are significant barriers to them participating and being served by transition houses. If you're interested more in that work, there's a publication by Atira Women's Resource Society that April and I assisted with, and you can find that on our website under Promising Approaches for housing older women who are fleeing violence or abuse. Secondly, the Institute for Research and Public Policy published a fabulous report on designing a national senior strategies for Canada. Again, excellent publication, but there's just no discussion of women. There's two components to this work that we're doing with older women. One is consultation, figuring out what the barriers to well-being are, and the second is tool development. So working with older women to take action in some way on an issue that they have identified. And the reason why we did this really reflects the language of this quotation on the slide. The women we worked with were very enthusiastic about being involved in change. I want to mention that from the beginning, the work on the Older Women's Dialogue project has been a collaboration with WestCoast Leaf. We started the project in about 2011, and it's continuing through different kind of permutations over the years. And we've included about 550 older women over the years, including the advisory committee, the women we consulted with, and also the women who participated in the tool development groups. So why do we do this work? Why are we focusing on older women? We want to support older women to be involved in influencing law and policy change. We want to enhance everyone's capacity to understand aging issues through a lens that considers also gender, and gender issues through a lens that considers aging. And we want to make recommendations for change that we both think will have a positive impact on older women. And if you look at the two reports that we've written thus far, they both have a strategy section that are effectively making suggestions for where we think change needs to occur based on our research. We've published 2 consultation reports to date, and you can download them both for free from the Older Women's Dialogue Project website. One was published for International Women's Day this year in 2017. It's called We Are Not All the Same. And the first report was published in 2013, Your Words Are Worth Something. So I want to say something about the groups of women that we've worked with to do tool development to take action thus far, because really this is where the learnings have come from developing the Promising Practices tool that I'm going to introduce today. So far we've worked with 4 groups of older women, and we have another group that we're working with right now. With each group of women, we met for a period of about 1.5 years. With each group, we met regularly. We talked about the challenges, the barriers to their well-being. We provided learning opportunities for the women as needed in response to what they thought they wanted to learn more about. We engaged with them in developing their tools, so engaging the right facilitators, whether it was a videographer, a designer, interpreter, to help them kind of tell the story they wanted to tell. And we helped them work with the larger community to share their tool. As part of the process, at each meeting, we provided meals or snacks at the beginning of the meeting. Every woman received a $20 honorarium in respect of her time for each meeting she attended, and we provided 2 bus tickets for every meeting so that women could be there. We also provided some funding to the support agency that we were collaborating with to allow their staff to dedicate properly some time to the project rather than having this be required to be an in-kind contribution from that organization. Our sense is that nonprofits are a little burnt out by contributing to everyone else's projects. I have a dog on the floor who's chewing something. Just a moment, I'm going to take that away because I think it's making noise. Sorry, Bunny. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if you could hear that, but just wanted to make sure. So the picture right here on this first slide is a picture of the older women we worked with through the Downtown Eastside Women's Center in Vancouver. For those listeners who don't live in Vancouver, the Downtown Eastside is well known for being an extremely low-income community in Vancouver. The Downtown Eastside Women's Center is a nonprofit agency that with a meal program, advocacy, and many other services that support the women living in that community. The group we worked with included primarily Indigenous women and also one trans woman. So we went through a process with them to talk about what are the different barriers they experience in life, and they talked about issues related to poverty, to housing, to violence. And the issue they landed on as being the most fundamental to them is safe housing where they can live without discrimination. The women worked together and developed a series of 3 videos based on 3 of the stories. 3 women shared their story. All the women shared their stories. And then they chose as a group the 3 they wanted to focus on. And we worked with a videographer to make 3 to 4 minute videos. And we also worked with the group facilitator, Faye Blaney, to develop an educational workshop that utilized the videos because all the women were involved through the center in doing some education community about their experiences. So there was a sense that there was some capacity to provide sustainability to this work because the women could work with their facilitator to do workshops in community on this topic and to show the videos when they did the workshops. Now the videos are all available on our website if you want to watch them. Secondly, we worked with a group of women through the South Granville Senior Center. Now, I don't need to tell you much about the South Granville Senior Center because Clemencia is here to talk about their work and the volunteers that they work with. We worked with a group of Latin American women specifically, meeting with the assistance of a facilitator. After much discussion, the women decided their most urgent quality of life issue was they could not afford prescription medication. And they developed a video documentary including 3 of their stories, as well as a poster campaign inviting people to contact the government. We worked with the Richmond Women's Resource Center. They were a group of women that we had met through phase 1 of consultation. There's about 22 women were involved in the work, and they were all immigrant women from mainland China. The group decided the most urgent issue was not being able to afford dental care and oral hygiene treatment. Each woman had a story involving their teeth, involving loss of teeth, pain, secondary infections, including heart problems, inability to chew food, nutritional deficiencies, but all contributing to helping us to understand that dental care is not a luxury or cosmetic. It's a pretty fundamental healthcare issue. They developed a petition and a brochure that incorporated their stories. They circulated the petition throughout their networks, and we also sent it to senior centers. And they gathered roughly 3,000 signatures, and we all went to Victoria to present their petitions, and they told their stories to the Chief of Staff of the Minister for Health. Finally, we worked with a group of women through the Aboriginal Mothers Centre. This was a group of women that we'd met through the phase 2 of our consultation work. They identified lack of appropriate housing for seniors and elders as the most urgent issue for them, and they wrote a letter collaboratively with the support of the group facilitator, which was sent to various agencies and government ministries. After doing this tool development work for years and completing an evaluation process that involved the women, we thought it would be worthwhile to document our learnings from the process. The process evolved into this promising practices tool that we're launching today. So in my remaining time, I just want to say a few things about this guide. You can download it for free, look through it yourself. I think it's not super complicated. I'm happy to take phone calls and emails if you have further questions we don't address today. So the elements, basic elements of the guide is 5 promising practices, including key questions, tips for enhancing capacity, and examples from our experience falling under each of the 5 promising practices. Who is the guide for? Well, when we designed it, we thought that it would be useful to seniors and women serving organizations, agencies that work with older women and staff as staff or volunteers, folks in government, policy and law reform, researchers and academics, and also students. But that's certainly not the limit. And if you find there's other ways you're using it in your work or people you're sharing it with, I would be thrilled to hear about that because it's helpful to us to understand better the impact of our own work. So we mentioned 5 promising practices in the tool. And I'm just going to let you know what they are. So supporting older women's leadership, which really means allowing the women to lead and not taking over. Addressing accessibility, safety, and inclusion across difference, including emotional and cultural safety and freedom from discrimination and racism. Working across generations, so involving students and volunteers from younger generations. Collaborating and working in partnership with other agencies primarily. And meeting basic needs and showing respect. And for our work that involved providing honorariums, food and transportation, and meeting other needs as they emerged. And I know Shahnaz and Clemencia will have more to say about some promising practices they've identified in their work, so there'll probably be more to add to this piece. So how can you use this tool in your work? I see this tool as a useful training resource. If you have new staff or volunteers who've never worked with older women or seniors or women, or who want to learn how to expand their practice to including older women specifically better. Share the publication with a potential funder, a potential collaborator or partner to start a conversation about working together. Cite the tool in a funding application for authority for the need for certain kinds of resources to support the inclusion of older women, such as honorariums, transportation, childcare, counseling. Curricula and professional development. So if you're teaching at a university, if you're providing professional development to other practitioners, you could include the tool in your training. And finally, a resource for research and ethics boards applications. For those of you who are academics, you have to go through this process, and you might find this tool helpful in helping you to think about what kind of issues that need to be addressed in order to help the participants to feel safe. Now, currently we're working with a 5th group of older women. Based on the lessons we've learned from the previous groups, we are providing on-site legal information and assistance for an hour after almost every group meeting, and more learning opportunities. Those just emerged as things we could have done better last time around. We found that women cannot work on policy change if they're in crisis, so we need to bring the resources to them to help with the crisis situation. Many older women want to participate in poverty project work, but they just have too many urgent issues that must take priority. In closing, I would just like to say it has been a tremendous privilege to work with the older women we met throughout this project. My experience was that older women brought tremendous knowledge, experience, and patience to their work with us, and sometimes patience with us, I have to admit. They demonstrated tremendous resilience in the face of surviving some horrible experiences, some of them, and they showed up, they worked hard, and they had great ideas. It's a huge loss to not include their knowledge in policy and law reform work, but they do require support in order to show up and participate in the process. So having said that, I'm going to pass the microphone on to Shahnaz. Just give me a moment here to press the right button here. It's in a different place as it was yesterday, Benedict, so. Hey, Benedict, can you override me and pass the mic on? Because actually,
I just did.
I can't see you. Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. This is Shahnaz Rahman. I am from WestCoast Leaf. I just wanted to give a very brief sort of sense of what WestCoast Leaf is. It's a non-profit organization that has been around since 1985, and it is the first and the only organization in BC that is dedicated to advancing women's equality through law. We were founded largely with the goal of ensuring that the promise of equality of rights in the Canadian Charter of Rights would translate into a reality for women. The 3 areas of our work is litigation, law reform, and public legal education. So just giving you that brief orientation, I'll move on to the next piece of our work. So why outreach to older women? Building on what Krista has already shared, I just wanted to give a bit of background context to the first time I heard about the project, which was in 2012. And I, was made aware that basically our target was to reach out to 150 older women through the duration of the first phase of the project. My first reaction was feeling really appalled. I said, oh my God, how would we reach 150 older women in the span of a year? Much to my surprise, a year later, basically it really was an astonishing sort of thing that we not only reached 150, we actually reached over 300 women in the first phase of this project. So this really, my initial reaction was that why would women want to talk with us? But the thoughtful strategy that we put into consultation with these women really made this the target 150 women to surpass that target into 300 women. That included 22 focus groups in 9 different languages with women. So when women were invited to share their thoughts and discuss key issues impacting them, and my experience with those processes was that women really wanted to be heard. It was a long time that they had remained silent, and just the invitation, the respectful invitation to give their feedback was really valuable, which actually marked that success. Now, after the first phase of the project, we identified that there was some gaps in those consultations of underrepresented women. There were women that we had missed out on speaking to. This included women with disabilities, Aboriginal elders, and women that were lesbian or trans women. So we identified a need to reach out to those women. That led to the second phase of our project. And in the way we were phrasing how to reach out to those women, we used at the term at that time internally, hard to reach group of older women. And let me tell you, the first consultation meeting that we had with the older Aboriginal elders, it was it was pointed out in a very clear way that the term hard to reach in itself was a condescending term, because really, if you look at it, who is hard to reach? If it's not easy for us to reach older women, how easy would it be for older women to reach us? So who's really hard to reach? And it helped us reframe these underrepresented communities in a way that was more sort of self-reflective of how we reach out to them. One of the things that became really apparent in our consultation was the experience of invisibility. And as Krista mentioned earlier too, most women felt invisible, and this invisibility really also informed our outreach initiatives to how to give visibility to women in a way by reaching out to them. Women also experienced isolation and shame. It was, sort of our observations on how women actually, even intentionally, sometimes isolated themselves from the fear of experiencing the discrimination that the outside society was presenting. And the social responses to these older women really created much of this isolation and shame for themselves. The systemic discrimination that women faced, consistently was also sort of an apparent theme in their experiences. So in our outreach efforts, one of the things that we did was we recognized these barriers. We recognized the women that were sharing their stories, sharing their issues, experienced poverty, disability, family violence, and caregiving challenges. And all these were not they were interwoven. A lot of women were facing all of these issues and in sharing this. And in our outreach efforts to these women, it was really important to see how we can address or make things a bit easier for them as they come together to share their experiences. With poverty, we know that most women, like women on their own, are the poorest of the poor, especially women that are single mothers. But older women on their own are about 13 times more likely to be poor than seniors living in families. And we know that health is a huge issue for women. As they age, they encounter disability. And sometimes disability and family violence is actually more interconnected, because a lot of times women suffered disabilities as a result of the violence they experienced in those relationships. And caregiving continued to be one of the roles that many older women we found were taking on, even in their elder years as they were aging, to give care to other people. So those were sort of some of the contexts that we were seeing as we were reaching out, some of the barriers that we saw that women were experiencing as they spoke to us. So what were the lessons that we learned in working with these women? One of the biggest lessons that I feel emerged for me was respecting the voices of older women. It was really important. And in the guide in itself, there is one of the examples of how we did that, and that was in one of the older women's group that we did with the Richmond Resource Society. Initially, the discussion was geared towards women's experiences of discrimination that they were facing in public transportation, in the buses, especially with the seating areas around, that are designed for seniors, that older women were reporting personal stories of how they were disrespected, how one woman accidentally pushed, a stop bell, and it was a mistake, but she was forced out of the bus. So there were really horrific stories that were emerging, and we got the sense that that's where the direction of the project would be going. But about a few sessions later, we were surprised to know that actually women wanted to focus on the dental hygiene of, the dental care, and the lack of access to dental care was a prime issue. So even though listening to the earlier issues around public transportation, the project team was putting their energies around gathering research in the area, trying to sort of help women in identifying a tool, respecting their voices was really important. It took precedent over what we were, what the project interest was. So we basically shifted the gear accordingly to the women's direction, and then the tool around the dental, the letter that was developed, that came out of it, that we basically changed the focus. Not we didn't change, the women had the power to change the direction of the group they were engaging in. So focus on process as much as outcome. Overall, throughout the 3 years in the project of our consultations in different phases of the project, we realized that the process was just as important as the outcome. It wasn't just the tool that we were focusing on. We were focusing on how that tool comes around, how women's voices are incorporated in that tool, and how process was such an important part of this discussion. And we focused a lot on that. Accessibility and inclusion. And again, going back to what I earlier said about hard, quote unquote, hard to reach, really recognizing the limitations of older women and how we were easing off that accessibility and inclusion for them. For instance, in the first phase of the project, we didn't want to miss out on the voices of women that didn't speak English. That language was a barrier for them. And that led us to invest funds in the project in interpretations and translations of sessions, so women felt included and women's experiences were, heard, even though they spoke different languages. And of course, at the end of the project, we saw how consistent that language was, whether they spoke Farsi, whether they spoke Hindi, Punjabi, Chinese, any language, but the issues were universal, like the issues were the same. Strategic collaborations. After the first phase of the project, we also realized that there were agencies and organizations we need to partner with. The project didn't just end with the consultations. We formed strategic collaborations. We honored those partnerships with 4 different organizations. The 4 host agencies came out, which was Downtown Eastside Women's Center, Richmond Resource Society, Aboriginal Mothers Center, and of course the South Granville Senior Center. So those collaborations emerged out of those consultations. And inclusion with safety. Those consultations and the discussions we were having also really had to have a level of safety, because in these consultations, women were sharing part of themselves. They were sharing some parts of themselves that were very private to them, that they had never spoken about. So it's creating a sense of safety. And I have to really here, April is on this webinar, and I want to just give a lot of credit to April in doing a fabulous job in facilitating these consultation sessions with that lens on safety for all women as they shared their experiences. So some considerations, or if we were to give any recommendations based on our own experiences with this project, we would say that ensuring language interpretation needs are met is really crucial. BC's population and is constantly changing. It's really almost impossible to turn our backs on the reality of the demographics of Lower Mainland. So really ensuring that those needs are met, that the projects are inclusive of all demographics. recognizing inequality and privilege. And that lesson was learned, again, that's something that's shared in the guide as you read it, is in one of the groups that we conducted with Aboriginal elders, half of the women in the group were Aboriginal and the other half of the elders were Caucasian women. And during the first 3 sessions, there was a dynamic that formed in that group where the non-Aboriginal elders were taking on a lot of speaking time or talking space in those groups, which kind of created a power imbalance. There was inequality. It sort of echoed the whole experiences for Aboriginal elders of being silenced and, the whole colonial history. So when this was pointed out to us, basically it helped us to pause and reflect on our own facilitation that was going on, that was not, that needed a little bit of shift in it. So we paused, we acknowledged the dynamic that had occurred and changed our facilitation model to one that was more inclusive, that did more small group work, that had addressed those strategies and named that inequality and the dynamics that was happening in that group. That was a lesson learned for us, but also recognizing. And my thoughts are that as we embark on projects, there are constantly lessons that emerge. And I feel really privileged to be part of this project where we were able to honestly take a look at those, recognize those inequalities and privilege firsthand in the work that we were doing with the women themselves. We identified accessibility to barriers. What were some of the barriers that were, causing women to be in there. So for instance, in the first phase of the project or the second phase of the project too, we were not expecting women to come to us. We were going to women where they found it was more accessible for them to come to us. So whether they were senior centers, long-term living, or just venues that were really accessible for them to participate in these discussions. When we embarked on the phase where we were doing tool development group, we wanted to be sure we're on the same page with the host agencies. So really clarity on roles and expectations so that the outcome is really, what we were desiring. And respecting needs. Food is a factor that also brings people together, and it eases some of those difficult conversations we were having. So we had built in honorarium, food expenses, and transportation to ease the accessibility for women to participate in these discussions. And when I look back at the key successful outcomes of the project, it really amazes me to this day to see that over the span of the project, we consulted with over 500 women. We formed really valuable partnerships with 4 organizations where we did the tool development work. This resulted in service and referral connections for these women. We were able to I know that some of the sessions women directly approached us for some services that they needed, and some referral connections to support them in their personal situations. And that led to more support to these women, even on an individual basis. And today, this guide that has come out as a result of the work that was done on those projects. So our relationships have informed and continue to feed and inform our other future projects. And our hope is that we can maintain these sustained relationships to, do more work for older women and advance their well-being. So thank you for your time. I'll pass it on to Clemencia now.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Clemencia Gomez, and I am the Executive Director of the South Granville Senior Center. Today, I'm going to talk about how we engage older women volunteers here at the center. Virtually all Canadian no-profit organizations rely on volunteers to some degree. 28% of volunteers in Canada are women 55 and older. Women are more likely to volunteer than men, while younger people are more likely to volunteer. Older women, particularly those aged 65 to 74, contribute the most volunteer hours, 39% of all volunteer hours. Here at the center, the South Granville Senior Center, we provide a variety of wellness, recreational, educational, multicultural, and food programs and services for more than 1,500 seniors in our community. By providing those services, we help to keep seniors healthy, active, and independent. We have more than 458 volunteers. 113 of them, they are permanent volunteers, and 345, they are special events volunteers. Those volunteers put more than 4,000 hours a year. And if we talk about money contribution, they give us $153,000 a year. 90% of our permanent volunteers are women aged 55 here at the center. 77 of them live alone. 26% of them are widows, and 51% of them are single. 83 of these volunteers, women that work here, are low income, and 20% of them are from diverse cultural background. The contribution of our volunteers are immeasurable. Older women volunteers work as a board members, run 18 of our 40 programs that we have here, that we provide here. They provide information and referral. They do reception jobs. They help with special events and assist with fundraising projects. When I say permanent volunteers, they are people who work here 4 hours a week. Our older women's volunteers have reported that volunteering here at the center has a positive effect in their physical and mental health, increase their sense of belonging, purpose, and self-respect. And for volunteer women, especially immigrants, volunteering here present an important opportunity to connect, to feel safe and included in the community, as well as they have opportunities to learn and to learn new skills. Our volunteer program brings together a number of different and diverse community groups. We have here seniors, youth, local business, ESL class and students, newcomers to Canada, and immigrant women who welcome the opportunity to practice English and to learn more about the Canadian customs. Most of the older immigrants, women that come here to work with us, are volunteers, and they are retired from working as a cleaners. And surprise to me when they come here and they say they live in Canada for more than 20 years. And I say, why you don't speak the language? And they say, well, I work as a cleaner for 20 years at night, and during the day I take care of my children. So they never have the opportunity to go to school to learn English. And now they are here, older, without English, and very low income, because working as a cleaner, they don't give them any too much CPP or anything. And sometimes new immigrants that they come here to volunteer because they feel very isolated. They want to practice their English or learn their English here. And they have the desire to share their skills with one another. Some other volunteers want to get experience in the Canadian society and improve the self-esteem, because when you come here and you are new in this country, we don't have any, our self-esteem really goes down, and we have this dependency of our sponsors, and also we don't have any networks, so we don't have any people that we know. So when they come to volunteer with us, they build their networks here. They start to practicing or learn English, and they start to know more about how to work in this society. And so, and they learn new skills and new relationships. They create new relationships too. Here at the center, we have developed successful strategies to better engage older female members and volunteers. We recognize that older women have tremendous knowledge and experience to share with the community. And we encourage them to utilize their unique skills as a volunteers, as a board of directors, as a facilitators, and as a community leaders. I am going to talk about the experience that we have with the Spanish-speaking older women's group. 7 years ago, we consultation with them, they told to us that, you know, the Spanish community will lack resources, we lack the knowledge of the services and programs that the government having here, because it was no translation of materials, because the language barriers. So we applied to the New Horizons several years ago to organize and to train 20 older women from the Spanish community, leaders in their community, in their churches, in their groups. So we got the grant and we trained 20 women about services and programs that the government provide for seniors in the community. From there, we translate all these, we create materials, and we translate all the materials in Spanish. And these 20 women went to their community and start to train people and to do presentations in the community about programs and services from the government. It was amazing how so many people didn't know these programs. It was even people took crying because they didn't know that program, and they didn't access to that program because they didn't know. So after 7 years working with them, so they are here. They provide information and referral once a week here at the center in Spanish, and people from the community come here for this information. Also, as Krista mentioned, we work with the West Coast Lift, and they got part of the other project, and they did these amazing videos asking for support for more pharmacare. We also work with BC Association of Community Response Network. They got some training about abuse, neglect, and self-neglect, and we translate these materials in Spanish, and we disseminate the information in our community. Our volunteers and members play an important role in program planning and in the implementation process. They are part of the decision making. We acknowledge older women's knowledge and contribution by building trust. And how we build trust? We take time to understand who they are and learn about their issues and their experience in their lives. We reduce power difference here by acknowledging that they exist. They have something to offer and they have something to contribute. We have a collaboration decision making here. We seek older women's input and advice and making them feel valuable, welcome, important, and visible. We have planning meetings once a year. We involve all the members, that majority of them, they are women, and we involve all the volunteers. And we ask them what they want to see at the senior center, how they want to see it. Also, we have volunteer meetings once every 2 months, and we also evaluate the program all the time. We ask them what is working, what is not working, and how we can improve things in here. We evaluate and we acknowledging and respect the opinion of the older women. We fostering an environment that older women can feel safe and free of judgment. Our principles here, we act as a safe, accessible, and inclusive space for older women. We recognize and value older women here at the center and help them to recognize that they still having something to give and to offer. Our culture here is very caring, open, and inclusive, and you don't have to be afraid to be yourself. We are flexible. We provide the programs with flexible roles, flexible time, and flexible length of commitments. We are freedom for identity. We are not all the same here. We have middle, senior generation, younger generation of seniors, and the old generation of seniors. We have also many people from multicultural different backgrounds, and so this gives us a space where we can be respected. We talk about some challenges, and I think Sharon talked about some challenges about women's here. We know that older women that are 55, between 55 and 65, have more barriers to participate, and they have, because they have to work, they are low income, and there are no government programs that support the financial well-being of these women, of these people. So it's a gap in there that the society has to recognize. Older women are often primary caregivers for children, grandchildren, and parents. And the physical disabilities and transportation issues are barriers for them. Our recommendations here are, I want to the government subsidize programs that support older women who are in the 55 and 65 break, and the people that live in fixed income. I want the funders start acknowledging that they have to include in their budget money for honorariums, for travel, for food for our volunteers. And I want also to, I have some experience here for women coming, older women retired that wants to do counseling, but they don't have the license to do it. And so the government help them with the license so they can provide this volunteer work here at the center will be good. And also I want to encourage corporations to incentive the retired employees to volunteer. And some tell us they offer that kind of incentives. And when volunteers work with here, when they are retired, they provide us some money because they work more than 500 hours here at the center. So I want to say thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you to the three of you. Thank you very much. We still have a few minutes left, so I invite everyone to unmute yourselves and either speak up or type in the chat box if you have questions. Now is a good time. Anyone? All right, well, while you're thinking about it and typing, I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you to Krista, Shahnaz, and Clemencia for coming in today and talking about the tool. I'm going to cut and paste the link to the CCEL website so that all of you can click and learn a bit more about the Older Women's Dialogue Project and see the full tool. It is right here, so look in your chat box right now. I'm going to send this right here. Perfect. And you'll be receiving an email tomorrow with a link to the recording and to the presentation. Otherwise, you can also find it on cnpea.ca. We'll be more than happy to answer any question you may have, but you still have about 3 minutes, actually 5 minutes. So if you have questions, go ahead. Otherwise, is there anything, Krista, you wanted to add?
I just heard some sudden background noise, so I'm wondering if somebody's trying to ask a question. I was trying to decipher if that was that.
No, I think that's from the South Granville office.
Okay. You know, from our perspective, from evaluation perspective, and thinking about how useful this tool could be, I'd be really interested in hearing if anybody finds they're citing it in their work. If you have time to send me off a quick note. The thing about this Promising Practices tool is that we never expected to develop it. So when we got funding for various parts of this work, so we got the initial chunk of funding for consultation came from the United Way Lower Mainland. The second chunk came from the Vancouver Foundation, and the tool development work was funded jointly by the Vancouver Foundation and the federal government. And we never planned to develop the Promising Practices tool. It just, by the end of the work, we felt like we needed some place to put this information down, to document the process and what we learned. It also came from feedback from agencies that we were collaborating with. When things didn't work, they wanted us to document that as well, so that the same mistakes don't keep happening over and over again in terms of community work. So this was a way for us to kind of share some aspects of evaluation and what we learned in a way that we thought would be more useful than putting our evaluation report online, because it's not a very interesting tool, the evaluation report itself. So if it's just an experiment, really. We hadn't expected to develop this tool. So if it turns out to be useful to folks and you find yourself using it, it's really helpful for us to know. Or if there's parts of it that don't work or that you think should be done differently, we always have the capacity, because everything's online, to sort of make changes. So we welcome feedback from community.
And once again, for your feedback, you will find Krista, Clemencia's, and Shahnaz's contact information in the early slides where their bios are located. Or you can contact me. The email address that you can reach me at is on your screen right now, benedicts.cnpea@gmail.com, and I'll be more than happy to put you in touch. And finally, as speaking for CNPEA, I'm always curious to hear, how we're doing and how we can improve our webinars. So you'll see a link right here, which is a very brief survey on the webinar that you just attended. If you can take a minute to take that survey, it would be wonderful. It would be really helpful for us. And I'll make sure to pass your feedback on as well to our presenters today. So just like this, it's almost 11, so unless someone has a question, I believe we're going to call it a day. We've got 2 minutes. Now is your time. I think everybody's really shy today, so we'll just let everyone mull it over, have a look at the tool, review the slides if you want to, and thank you very much, everyone, for participating today. Krista, Shahnaz, and Clemencia, good job. We'll talk very soon, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.